is Kathy from Homestead Seasonal Living, and we are diving more into our Cultivate and Nourish project. And today we have Tessa from Homestead Lady with us, and she's going to be talking to us all about building community, which, you know, I think is so important. So hi, Tessa.
Howdy.
So let's talk about building community. Talked a little bit at the beginning about community, building community, and one of the things that you and I talked about frequently, actually, is building community at home. Like, everything starts at home, right? So tell us some ways we can build a community at home that will help us, you know, go out into the rest of the world and build a
community. Okay, fair enough. That's a good place to start. I think probably the most important community that you ever build is your family. But I think it's important to kind of just remind yourself that your family doesn't necessarily have to be biological. So if you are empty nesters, or you've only got one kid, or you don't have any kids, or you're living with your parents, or whatever it is, or say you've got friends that you share an apartment with, those people are all your family. And whoever it is that is around you and supports you, that's your family. And so focusing on them first is just, we always start at the foundation. So that's where we begin. And quite frequently, these are the people who know you the best. And so sometimes we're a little critical. I'm thinking of my children, you know, siblings don't always see eye to eye. And sometimes your family is a big, hot mess. And maybe you don't have a family culture that you really, it's not the one you want to have. You want to build it and make it better. But just because it's difficult, I always put this caveat at the beginning, just because it might be challenging doesn't mean it's not a good place to start. It really is. It gives you a basis to go, like you said, move out into the rest of the world. So we're going to start really easy stuff with family, especially if you're struggling, which every family does from time to time. One of my favorite things, in fact, my next book is all about traditions. Traditions are easy. They usually, like, pick a holiday. In fact, in the section of the book I have now, one of the homework assignments is to just write down every tradition you can possibly think of, whether it's a movie night that you do with your family, or Christmas stuff, or there's always a holiday you can choose. But there's other family culture stuff like bath night with the babies and things like that. Mm-hmm. Just write them all down, and you'll bring from your childhood. And if you're married or you have a partner, you'll have to include theirs too, even if they seem weird. Some of the things from my husband's family, I'm like, what? That's a thing? That's not even a thing. But you know, if you're building something together, you want to get everybody's opinion. And then the other thing that I like to tell people to do is go ahead and take stuff off that list. Right. If you have stuff that you did in your family that you just hated, don't do it anymore. You're an adult. You can say, I'm not going to do that anymore. But if there's new stuff, if there's stuff like a holiday from another religion or another culture that you've never tried, go do it. If for no other reason, the food is going to be really good. That's so right. Start with easy. Holidays, food is always appealing. Dressing up, if there's an occasion to, like, if you have a chance to go to a Hindu celebration of any kind, a wedding, even a funeral, the clothes are going to be fun. So just go have some fun. Pick a new tradition that you've never tried before, or one that you really love. Sure to be a crowd pleaser. And just do it in the next 6 months. Goodness knows right now, we're all sharing an experience worldwide that we could use a little fun, you know? We could use an activity that doesn't have anything to do with illnesses or crisis, just something fun. It's okay to just have fun. So traditions, easy, super easy. Write a list down, pick one, try it in the next 6 months. But in the same, not necessarily family, but the family of your immediate community, they're your neighbors. Right. Neighbors are super important. Yeah. Having good neighbors. I don't know if you've been blessed with good neighbors or maybe blessed with not so great neighbors.
Yeah, but both in my life, right? Yeah.
And sometimes the not so great ones can actually turn into really good friends with a little, I don't want to call it schmoozing, but you do want to reach out to your neighbors. Right. And there's some, you're really good at, in fact, whenever I pack a welcome basket or something for a neighbor or a friend, I think about you. You know, go to any number of your posts that talk about put some bread in a basket and go say hello or write a letter or whatever. You're really good at that. so people all have access to that. But if you want something more formal, like an event, some people like an event where they can write invitations and have a time. You maybe don't want just people dropping by anytime. I've thought of a couple things that we've done that your audience might enjoy. One of them was a dinner where we just invited, like we didn't do the whole street. This was back when we lived in the neighborhood. We didn't do the whole street. We picked like 5 families and we invited them to come over for a potluck dinner, but they had to bring something from their family genealogy, their family culture. Like it could be a dish from country, or like something their grandma made, whatever. And then they had to tell us about it. And it was just a really fun way to get to know stuff about people that we probably never would have known just talking over the fence. But that means, you have to clean your house and you have to invite people. Sometimes that's just too much work. So maybe you want to integrate neighbors into something you're already doing. I don't know about you, but I could really use some help around canning season, because there's just so much to do in the harvest time. So we've also done this, had people come over. We did it once for chickens when we were harvesting chickens. It's just a little grody, like that's kind of intense for especially people who don't know well. We're canning everything, peaches, potatoes, corn, any of that stuff that is simple to can in a group. Don't go crazy. Like don't do tomatoes, because tomatoes are messy and nobody likes canning tomatoes. Pick something everybody loves. And make sure that you get the kids involved. Like if you do green beans, kids can be put on prepping the green beans, and then they can go off and play, and you can talk with the grown-ups while you actually accomplish something. So it just kind of depends on what your personality type is. Do you have a hard time relaxing and just hanging out? Do you need to accomplish something? Well, then plan a canning party. But if you like just hanging, maybe a little potlucky dinner might be good. And just get in people that you don't know really well yet. And that can be really hard for some of us. Others don't understand why it's a struggle because they talk to everybody. People in the grocery store are their best friends. Others of us, we need a reason. We need an excuse to go meet that person we don't know. And especially right now.
And because of right now, let's remember, and it's getting to be nice, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, we're starting to get to summer. We can do things outside. If you live in an area where you have an outside, like you're not in an apartment, obviously, in a big city. But if you have a porch, or I live in a neighborhood, the area I live in, everybody has like at least an acre of land. And one of the things they must have done when they originally subdivided the land back in the 70s, they built a fire pit on every lot. So everyone has a backyard fire pit.
Nice.
And so that's a great way to have people over. Now in the summer, I also live in Montana, so it's also fire season. So there's a very limited amount of time where you can actually use the outdoor fire pit. But when you can, it's a lot of fun.
2-week window.
It's like 2 weeks in June and 2 weeks in October, kind of. But it's a fun way to have people over, and you don't have to worry about cleaning the house.
Right, true. Very good point. He doesn't like s'mores. So, yes, anything you can do outside ever is a great idea. Plus, then the mess stays out there.
That's right. And can I just say how much I love the idea of sharing tradition. And I grew up in a part Serbian family, and at Christmas time, we always made potica, which is a Serbian nut bread. It's a yeasted dough, really rolled thin with this nut, kind of like buckling. But I always make it at Christmas time because that's when my family made it. And to this day, I still make it at Christmas time, and I give it away a lot to people. And it's like my way of sharing my family tradition with them. And people who have it, who've never had it before because they're not from that same ethnic tradition, just, they go crazy for it and they love it. So it's a great way to.
What is this manna you have given me?
I know.
Yes.
It is so good. Great. Okay. So neighbors, and what else? What other community can we help build once we've built our home community?
Well, I had a couple things. And again, you really do have to know your personality. So nobody is asking you, yes, go outside your comfort zone. Absolutely. That's always healthy. But don't try and be someone in something you're not. There are things that you're good at. So work those. And then if you want to build character, you can go work on really hard projects later on. But these are beginning things we can do. So one of the other things that we've done, after you've served your family and your close immediate neighbors, the best thing that I think you can do is go out and find service to perform in the community. And I think sometimes when we think of service, we think of like working in a soup kitchen, and that's a fantastic thing to do. Do that. That's amazing. There are so many other things. I know for mothers with small children, that kind of scenario is out of the question. You can't. It would be chaos, if you brought small children into a setting like that. And when I was in that phase, my kids are old now, and I make them slave labor everywhere. Like, let's go do this, let's go do that. But when they were young, one of the things we did was host a book drive. So we just went around our neighborhood. We dropped off little pamphlets that said, in a week, we're going to be back. Just leave books or movies on your porch. We'll pick them up. So again, this is kind of, it depends on your county, your state, whatever the rules are for you, but this could potentially be a thing you could be doing now if you're allowed. So you don't even have to interact with people. You just put it on the porch, you pick it up and take it. And we took it to, I think it was a women's shelter. I know it was a shelter, but I think it was specifically for women and small children. And the reason why I remember this event so much, it was really cold. So I was living in the West at the time. It was like November, and I remember freezing. And my little kids were freezing. I was in the wagon. They were just, oh, it's so cold. It's so fun, Mom. It's so fun. But we got to the shelter, and the woman was, I have never been so warm, because the woman was so excited about the stuff for the kids in particular. She said the little kids the big kids go off to school every day, but the little kids don't have anything to do. So you have no idea how, in fact, she started to cry, how much this means to us. And it took us, I don't know, like 4 hours total, but it made a huge difference to a group that we really love, which is kids, love kids. So that was really fun and really rewarding. It was a lot of work, I'm not gonna lie, but it was something that I could do with little kids that wasn't formal. I could do it on my own terms. So, but I don't want to discourage you from going into your community and finding formal service opportunities. Those are needful too. But if you need something a little different, I think you and I, a couple years ago, we were talking about hosting a clothing swap or a seat swap, just a swap kind of thing.
Yep.
They're so fun. I mean, crazy amounts of work. I am not going to lie. But there are several quality articles. Have you written one?
I wrote one.
Yeah,
I did write one. Did you? Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah. Everything was a long time ago.
I know.
It was a long time. We should be really smart by now.
Right.
But clothing are great. They provide an incredible opportunity for service and for the community. Everything's free. And sometimes it takes a little bit of like people would come in and they're like, well, how much does it cost? It's free. No, really, how much does it cost?
Right, yeah.
That's the only hard part of a swap, getting people to take the stuff and the organization. So those can be big projects, but there's, you've got all the time in the world. If you were to set a goal right now, your students, give yourself 9 months to come up with an idea, organize it, bring it to fruition and accomplishment. Yeah, you can do that. You can do anything in 9 months. That's fine. There's no rush. This is your goal. And then other obvious things in the community, like taking classes. I don't think that we often think of that as necessarily building community, but it really is. You'll know this as a community teacher. You teach canning lessons, right, in your community?
I do.
And other stuff, probably. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
But it really is a community building experience. If you take the time to go in class, talk to the teacher, talk to the other student. Don't just come in and sit in your same chair every week and not talk to anybody, including the teacher, trying to make a connection with you. But think of it as community building, going in to someone's classroom, and these aren't, professional teachers. We've got day jobs. And we come in and we share what we know, and we hope to get involvement from other people sharing what they know. But if you just sit there, then you're not accomplishing all the things that you could be accomplishing as far as building that community. So maintain those relationships even beyond. I had, when I was studying in a Master Gardener program, I had the opportunity to there was a big, huge community garden that hosted the classes. And so we then went out and performed our service hours in the garden. So I got to keep relationships with all these people, and I still talk to them. That was years ago, and I still talk to many of them, and we still swap, plant stories. Right. It's been invaluable. So go take those classes. There's all kinds of classes. Our genre is kind of, the homesteading self-sufficiency stuff.
Right.
But there's all kinds. There's art classes and exercise class. There's all kinds of classes. Right. Our communities are fantastic. And university extensions, galleries, museums, they can all help you and that are interesting to you.
And the thing that you're saying, I just want to
challenge.
Everybody, sorry to interrupt you. To remind everybody is that sometimes when we think about building community, if you're like an introvert, like I am, so anyone who's watching this who's kind of introverted, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be like having to be with people 3 nights a week because the horror of that, like, it would be horrible to me. It just would. It just drains me so completely. As much as I like to teach classes and do things, I can't be with people other than my husband every day. And so, but that isn't what community necessarily is about. It really is about going to the class and exchanging email addresses with the other students and with the teacher, and just maybe keeping in touch now and then, and tapping that knowledge base and allowing those people to also tap your knowledge base. So that, and being willing to do that. So if somebody has a canning question, they know that they can email me 6 months after canning class is over, and I'm still going to answer that canning question, right? And so, and the same thing, I took a dehydrating class, and even though I kind of had some basic dehydrating knowledge before, this was years ago, I learned a lot in that class because he had a lot of tips and tricks from somebody who'd been dehydrating for 30 years, right? Like all the little things that you do that you learn from experience that aren't in the books. Even though the people who read the book supposedly were doing it, those kinds of things. And I could email him and talk to him anytime. And he happened to actually own a health food store, so I could actually go in and talk to him. So he was part of my community. Nice. He wasn't somebody that I hung out with all the time. Now, I live in a small-ish town, right? So I'm not living in a huge city. But your community is the people that you're surrounding yourself with. So you can build that community. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be hanging out with them.
And you can choose.
Right.
Yeah. You choose in your community. And you can boot people out if they prove to be toxic or psycho. So you meet a lot of people in your town, but not all necessary for your community.
Right. And just because you take a canning
so that's a good
someone doesn't mean that you're inviting them over to your house for dinner ever necessarily. I mean,
no.
You might, but you might not. So don't feel like you have to be
friends with everyone. Not.
Yeah. Say that.
Right.
These are great.
That's not really what community is. I mean, if you go back, if we go back to where we started, which was the family, if you think about all of your family members, you're not necessarily besties with every single one of them.
Right.
Some of them actually maybe they have had to cut relationship ties with, but they're still part of your community because they're part of who you are. Right. And so you can pick and choose whom you interact with. The community isn't necessarily about being close. It's about creating relationships that can help each other. So there's kind of symbiotic in that way. And sometimes they don't turn out to be helpful and you need to get rid of them. But we're more talking about how to build the good ones.
Right.
But there are lots of ways to do it. And so I say again, know yourself. Be able to know which of these personality types you are and just honor it. And don't, sometimes we get frustrated with ourselves. Oh, I wish I were this way. Oh, I wish I were that way. But something that community can do is help you find balance. So I think in our interpersonal relationships, we're naturally drawn to people who are different than we are so that we can kind of feel balanced when we're together. Well, you can do that in various ways, in various places in your community.
Right.
So you don't have to stress out that it's all burdensome on you. It's not. Well, except for this last challenge, which I only give when you feel you're ready, and that is to teach. Right. So I feel that one of the best services that we can provide for each other is to open our mouths and just share what we know. And most of the time, I don't know what it's like for men, but for women, I often hear, I don't know enough. Somebody else is going to know more than me. Well, of course. That's why it's just a place to begin. That's why we get together, hopefully, as I'm teaching a principle, I will have someone in the audience say, oh, but I've done this. And then I'm enhanced. And then everybody else is, their education is enhanced.
Right.
So never let the truth, you don't know everything,
right.
keep you from teaching what you do know, which usually more than you think. If you've got, like, I've been canning for years, but I would love to live where you live for many reasons. So we could just like hang out and do this in person. But I would love to go to one of your canning just because, like you were saying about your teacher, you do things differently. For one thing, I don't know if you clean up your kitchen for your canning photos, but your kitchen's always so orderly. My kitchen is complete chaos every week. And so I would just like want to come over and can with you so I could learn to clean up my counter and put away my stuff, because that's what you could teach me, because I really need to learn it. I'm a good person.
I will say,
there's a lot of
my aunt was here visiting from Iowa and a couple of summers ago, and she's not really much of a cook at all, and certainly not a canner. But when she's here, I cook for her and her husband a lot, and that's why they like to come and visit, I think. But
right.
And I'm probably going to watch this. Hi, Aunt Tish. But I will cook them a lot, and she happened to mention that I cook very clean, and I do. I just have, it's just and I think it's just from experience. I cook and clean in a way that. And it might come from teaching classes, in that I only have so much space teaching a class, and so I've learned to kind of keep things moving. It could be from that, but I do cook very clean.
Well, I need to absorb it, whatever it is. And so that's just an example.
Right.
You be in my class where I'm talking about canning carrots, and you could share what you know, and I don't have to feel threatened by that. I think that's the other thing, that sometimes we feel threatened when people know more than we do or have a different perspective. No, it's cool. That's what community is about, is to share different. If we just all stood up and said the same stuff, how boring would that be? Nothing would be enhanced. So don't worry about teaching to start with. Don't worry. You can do it. If you really feel strongly like you need to share a message, share it. And it doesn't mean like you have to go into the community and stand in front of a class and teach. There are lots of different ways to share the things you know. Pardon me. Educating children is one of my things. It's just one of the things that I naturally do. And we would, a lot of times, at our last homestead, which was in a city, we would have tours of the homestead for kids. School groups and stuff would come through. And it was not formal at all. I mean, children in an acre of garden, the last thing that is formal. But, every little step, I would always create a little scavenger hunt, and they'd go through it. And every little step was education, but it was really natural and informal. And we got to share why we did what we did. And they got to ask really intelligent questions that always surprised me, what the things that they thought of. And it was enriching, but it wasn't formal. I wasn't standing in a class. It didn't involve technology. If you're afraid of technology, you don't have to worry. You don't have to use technology. You can invite grandkids over and share something you know. I remember when I was reading Melissa Richardson's book, it was her first book or her second book, on natural leaven. It's a sourdough book. It's a cookbook. But she has a lot of prose in her recipes. And I loved her perspective on various things. But one of the things she was talking about was she was teaching a class on sourdough. Again, teaching a class, and she lived to tell the tale. She's taught many classes. And this older woman came up to her and took her arm and said, my mother used to know this stuff. She taught it to me. But my grandchildren aren't interested. And so they don't know anything about how to leaven bread, how to use sourdough. This was just a sourdough example. And the woman looked at her and said, it's amazing what can be lost inside one generation, because people don't share. So students aren't receptive because it seems too weird. And so she said it more beautifully than that. I'm paraphrasing. But the idea has stuck with me. How much can be lost just in one generation if we don't share what we know? And never has it been more important to share what we know with each other, regardless of what it is. It's really important to stay connected when so much is taking us apart from each other. They're just simple little things that you can do to teach. they don't, I'm not gonna lie, teaching is work. Teaching is a lot of work, but it doesn't have to be something that, again, goes against your nature. It can be something that you already naturally do.
And it doesn't have to be a career path.
So
It's really a service. It can really be a service project.
it is.
I mean, because I teach classes locally, I get asked to volunteer to teach classes a lot. And so obviously there's only so much I can do and I can't do it for everyone, but I do have a few chosen charities. And so anytime they call me, the answer is always yes. For example, my local library, I'm a huge supporter of libraries, a gigantic supporter of libraries. So when my library association calls me and they're doing some sort of event, can I talk about whatever, canning or something, gardening or worm composting? The answer is always yes. And it's a super informal thing. Usually, it's like 20 people in a room. Who just come for that night's presentation. And they do them all the time, right? They have them on soap making.
You can think of them as
whatever. Yeah.
Right. And that's fun. That stuff is fun. It's fun to do. So why not do it with 20 friends you just haven't met yet? That's all. And if those things terrify you, then start small. But I do encourage people not to stay in a place where peopling is terrifying, because there are going to be natures that are just inclined to not be social. But this isn't really about being social. This is about building something that's really precious and needs to be built. It's worthwhile to go ahead and try and conquer a fear. Just do it at the right level. Like, don't try and jump off a cliff. Just start small. And if you have to go back to the beginning, back to the family, if you really feel like your family is the community you need to focus on, go for it. There's no community that's more important. So start there and work it this year. Just really focus on building the traditions, if that works for you. Find a holiday, find a quiet routine. Sometimes the word tradition is confusing to people. They think that sounds like a lot of work. Right. But what if this year you guys have a movie night every Friday? And it's just you sitting around in your underwear watching a movie with your family. That's it. Be popular. And you just kind of move up. Because the cool thing about this stuff is that as you build, it gets exciting. Like, it might sound like a lot of work right now, but it gets exciting and the relationships are rewarding. So even when you hit a hard one, and you're going to hit rocky ones here and there, that's okay. That's just people. But it's rewarding. It's a happy activity that strengthens you.
Right.
So eventually you won't feel like such a sacrifice.
That's right.
Except
and that's I think the whole project, the whole idea that this Cultivate and Nourish project got started was this idea that none of us are self-reliant. There are very few people in the world who can be 100% self-sufficient, no matter what book you read, no matter what. It's just very few people can actually accomplish that. Plus, it's a lonely
people.
It's also a lonely existence. Every time when we have this weird historical perspective that like the pioneers did it all on their own and they were like self-sufficient. No, they really did it in a community. They very much did it in a community. They weren't friends with everyone, but they did it as a community. And that's really what we still need. So instead of maybe independence, let's think about interdependence, how we can help each other. Because you're going to need help too someday. The community will help you if you help them. Right? I mean, we all need help.
I need help like every week. I need more community.
And my husband and our neighbors, they trade labor with each other. Like, they're all kind of good at different things. My husband's actually really handy with cars, and then the other guy is a cabinet maker, so he's like obviously a carpenter and really handy with that kind of stuff. So they kind of help each other out, because and if they just, if you need somebody to lift something heavy, you call your neighbor, move it around, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, it doesn't have to be formal. You could organize a little club where you traded labor, or you could just let it happen. But you don't know until you talk to people what they can do.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Tessa. Now, remind everybody where they can find you. Tell us your blog. I'm
at homesteadlady.com. That's it, homesteadlady.com. And then there's there are blinks down. Oh, my phone's ringing. See, that's my community trying to contact me.
That's right, they are. Well, thank you so much.
And
tell us your book.
Well, we have on Facebook. Homestead Lady has a Facebook page, but we have a Facebook group, which is really more active. So if you need, if you want to build community on Facebook, which some people aren't on it, and I applaud that, that's great. But if you are, it's just the Do-It-Yourself Homestead Facebook group. So you can find us there. It's after the book.
And she has
and then
links to her book below, so people can go buy your book.
The next one is about traditions and holidays, and I'm so excited about it. But it turns out it's really exhausting to write about traditions and holidays because, as the mom, you're the one orchestrating most of them. Like I said, I will not lie to people. This stuff is work, but apparently writing a book about it is even more work. So hopefully it'll be done for Christmas. I don't know.
Great. Well, thank you so very much for being here with us. I really appreciate it.